The moment Clara Vandenberg's flawlessly constructed world, a masterpiece of ambition, exhaustion, and financial success, crumbled was not marked by a thunderous failure, but by a sudden, terrifying stillness. It was 4:17 p.m. on a Thursday, the quintessential hour of peak performance. She was in the chrome and glass mausoleum of the private jet lounge, waiting for the final papers on a billion-dollar merger. Clara, 37, partner at Titan Global Consulting, was the personification of Manhattan aspiration. Her custom-tailored navy suit, which cost more than a small car, was a second skin. Her razor-sharp haircut was designed to minimize maintenance and maximize authority. Her life was measured in metrics only the very rich understand. The yield on her hedge fund portfolio, the scarcity of her co-op on the Upper West Side, and the sheer impossibility of her schedule. But as she reached for the leather briefcase, a silent, internal catastrophe struck. Her body, a machine honed for relentless acceleration, simply threw its engine. Her heart didn't pound with panic. It seemed to shrink in defeat. Her hands, usually precise instruments of deal-making, felt heavy and useless. Her iPhone 18, the neurological extension of her identity, slipped from her numb grip and shattered against the polished marble, the buzzing of its dozens of unread, urgent emails echoing mockingly in the silence. She didn't collapse. She just ceased motion, frozen in a posture of permanent, unbearable strain. The diagnosis, delivered 3 days later in a hospital suite that offered a panoramic view of the very skyline she had helped fund, was deceptively simple: burnout. "Your body is in total revolt, Ms. Vandenberg," the cardiologist stated, his tone matter of fact. "You've been operating at 150% capacity for a decade. We see this in people who confuse self-worth with net worth. You must stop, or your body will enforce a permanent shutdown." Stop. The word was a foreign curse. In Clara's universe, stopping was a cardinal sin. Stopping meant vulnerability. Stopping meant allowing the dozens of competitors, the other high-velocity particles she sped past daily, to gain ground. Failure wasn't just losing money. Failure was losing the narrative of success she had cultivated with brutal diligence. Her Manhattan existence was less a life and more an endless, expensive performance. Her alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., not to greet the day, but to conquer it. She managed to fit a 45-minute HIIT workout and a power breakfast, scrambled egg whites and a shot of bespoke green sludge, before her first 6 a.m. client call. Her daily spending was astronomical, not out of pleasure, but necessity. The $15,000 monthly co-op fees were the price of maintaining the illusion of stability. Her clothes were armor, sourced from European designers, each thread screaming, "I belong here. I am untouchable." She didn't wear the $2,000 Italian leather pumps because they were comfortable, but because they elevated her, physically and socially. Her friendships were transactional, measured by who could offer the best connections or the most exclusive gossip. Her entire purpose was fueled by two anxieties: the fear of struggling and the equally paralyzing fear of appearing to struggle. The driving philosophy was this: survival equals acquisition. Acquisition equals value. Value equals the only possible path to respect. She realized, staring out her sterile, minimalist windows, that she had spent 20 years in a gilded cage, buying and buying, not for joy, but to outrun the emptiness that was always nipping at her heels. The endless bills and the pressure to ostentar, to show off her status, were not side effects of her wealth. They were the engine of her misery. She hadn't been living. She had been surviving at a maximal, unsustainable cost. The next day, she dismantled the cage. She sent the resignation email, a model of professional efficiency, and instructed her assistant to freeze her accounts and rent out the apartment. Her escape wasn't to a familiar comfort zone. She chose Nepal, the thin air of the Himalayas, and a retreat that promised only silence, rice, and profound discomfort. She craved a world that refused to be managed, measured, or leveraged. The initial weeks were psychological torture. The silence was deafening. Her mind, accustomed to processing 3 spreadsheets and an email chain simultaneously, was a frantic inner Wall Street trading floor. Optimize this moment. Don't waste the view. You must monetize this experience. Is this mindful? Are you failing at meditation too? She couldn't focus on the breath because the breath was too slow. She was used to sprinting through tasks. Here, she was asked to merely stand and feel gravity. The required walking meditation drove her to madness. Taking 20 minutes to walk 50 feet, focusing on the weight shifting from heel to toe, felt like a deliberate mockery of her professional life. In Manhattan, walking was an aggressive act, a means to an end. Here, it was the end. The breakthrough, as profound epiphanies often are, was trivial. She stumbled on the path, and instead of immediately rebounding with her usual corporate resilience, she stayed kneeling, resting her forehead against the rough earth. The frustration of her failed career, her empty relationships, and her meaningless wealth converged in a quiet, humbling wave. And as her internal chatter finally subsided, defeated by sheer exhaustion, the world spoke. She wasn't observing the world through the lens of a productivity tool. She was immersed in it. The air was not just cold, it smelled of damp earth and pine resin. The sun on her neck was a distinct, warm pressure. The tiny ladybug meticulously scaling a blade of grass was not an object to be ignored. It was a testament to the patient, persistent reality that existed outside her ambition. For the first time, she truly saw the world, unburdened by the need to conquer it. She began the long, agonizing process of learning mindfulness, the art of attention. She wasn't just eating, she was tasting the bland rice, savoring the grainy texture and the subtle sweetness. She wasn't just sitting, she was feeling the sensation of her lungs expanding. She recognized the cruel irony. She had spent millions to achieve freedom, yet she had been entirely imprisoned by the relentless doing. The life she sought wasn't about earning more, but about needing less. Her journey continued, guided only by curiosity and a deepening appreciation for slowness. She exchanged her tailored suits for simple cotton and linen, and her itinerary was determined by local buses and chance encounters. She traveled through Southeast Asia, contrasting the pace of life there with New York's frenetic, expensive dance. In a small village in Vietnam, she watched a fisherman spend an hour mending a net, his movements fluid, his face radiating a calm focus that she had never achieved even while closing her biggest deals. She saw the true cost of her former life when she contrasted her own solitary, hurried dinners in Manhattan penthouses with the joyful, loud, collective meals she shared with families in simple homes. They were rich in connection, rich in time, rich in shared laughter. Their happiness wasn't contingent on the success of a merger or the purchase of a new status symbol. It was inherent in the act of being together. She realized that her pursuit of high-stakes financial survival had actually led to emotional starvation. Her quest for enlightenment gave way to a search for rootedness, and that search led her to Italy. She started with the language, which, unlike the harsh efficiency of English business terms, was lyrical and warm. The Italian word ciao was not just hello, but an invitation to share a moment. She found herself drawn not to the grand, tourist-choked cities, but to the deep, silent heart of the Umbrian countryside. She stepped off the regional train in a place called Borgo Celeste, the heavenly village, a town so small it felt like a secret. Borgo Celeste was a visual feast, a sensory balm. The stone houses were kissed by centuries of sun, painted in faded yellow and dusty rose. Life was dictated by the church bells and the agricultural seasons, not the NASDAQ ticker. People walked with an unhurried grace, their eyes trained on the horizon, not the screen in their palm. She rented a tiny, utterly charming apartment above a pasticceria, pastry shop. The air filled daily with the scent of sugar, yeast, and old coffee. A smell infinitely more nourishing than the sterile air conditioning of her former office. The shift from survive and ostentate to live and appreciate became palpable in her interactions. Her mentor in this new way of life was Nonna Elena, the baker below her apartment. Elena was a woman whose hands spoke the language of generations. When Clara first tried to help in the kitchen, she brought her Manhattan efficiency, trying to rush the folding of the pizza dough. Adagio, Clara. Maledizione, Elena snapped, then softened. Adagio. Lentamente. La vita è un dono, non un elenco di cose da fare. Slowly, Clara. Slowly. Life is a gift, not a to-do list. The dough, Elena explained, had to be respected. The yeast demanded time. The flavor developed in the pause, in the attention. It was the antithesis of the instant gratification that had defined Clara's career. Clara learned to distinguish the flavors of 3 types of olive oil produced on 3 different hillsides. She learned to spend an hour preparing a simple pesto from basil, grown in her own terracotta pot, savoring the scent of every crushed leaf. She learned to sit in the piazza and watch the interplay of light and shadow on the ancient fountain, treating it like the most important meeting of her day. Her old life had been about buying the best things to impress others. Her new life was about creating the best moments to nourish herself. She took the small income she earned doing basic web design for local artisans, the weaver, the vineyard owner, the ceramicist, working 4 hours a day to sustain her simple existence. Her purpose was no longer defined by how much she extracted from the world, but by how much she could contribute to the continuity of this beautiful, gentle place. Years later, Clara stood on the old town wall at dusk, watching the sun dip behind the distant purple Apennine Mountains. She wore simple, comfortable clothes. Her hands, once manicure perfect, but permanently strained from typing, were now strong and slightly stained from gardening. She had traded the relentless pressure to acquire and ostentate for the profound, sustaining dignity of simplicity. She had traded a 7-figure salary for a 7-course meal, lovingly prepared and slowly savored. Clara Vandenberg, the high-speed executive, was gone. In her place was Clara, the resident of Borgo Celeste, a woman who finally understood that the ultimate purpose of life was not found in the portfolio, but in the attention paid to the beauty that unfolds when you finally dare to slow down. Her life finally was her own, and it was rich beyond measure.